Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Mishpatim, and it includes, Mishpatim literally means laws, and that's exactly what there is in this Torah portion, lots and lots of laws. And most of the laws have to do with just running a justice system, running a normal civil society, a society where people are responsible for their actions, where courts levy punishments and ensure that people behave, and that society can be based on normal human behavior. And in fact, many people have compared some of the laws in this Torah portion with some of the laws that are found, for example, in the ancient Hammurabi Code, a code of laws that was prevalent in Mesopotamia during the time of Abraham, Isaac, during that period of time and afterwards. And it is clear that many of these laws are responding to norms that are in society at the time that they are given, at the time of Moses in the desert. And of course, we could do an entire study of this. It would probably take many, many weeks, and I'm not going to do that today. But I just want to focus on two groups of laws that I think are very interesting. So first of all, at the very beginning of the Torah portion in chapter 21, we have verses 12 and 13. He who fatally strikes a man shall be put to death. If he did not do it intentionally, but it came about by an act of God, I will assign you a place to which he can flee. Okay, so the first verse here is actually, I think, rather straightforward. A person who murders will himself be put to death. Now, today, it is common in many societies to resist this idea of capital punishment, and I'm certainly not entering into that discussion right now. But I think at the purest level, I think we can agree that if someone takes a life intentionally, then his life deserves to be taken as well. And that really is the idea that is set forth here. But in verse 13, I think we find something very interesting. First of all, you have immediately a distinction between somebody who has murdered someone, in other words, intentionally killed someone, and someone who did not intentionally do it. It happened by accident. It happened by negligence. It happened whatever, a number of reasons. And yet look how verse 13 is written. If he did not do it by design, but it came about by an act of God. What does that mean by an act of God? Okay? Well, basically what the Bible is telling us here, if you accidentally killed somebody, there are no accidents. Okay? It happened because it deserved to happen to you. Because clearly, if you accidentally killed somebody, you are responsible in some way. Now, maybe you're not. Because you didn't intend to murder someone, you won't be put to death. But you are going to be punished in some way. And in this case, we have this idea of cities of refuge. They will therefore, run to, and there will be certain cities, and we learn later on in the Bible that actually Moses sets aside specific cities for these kinds of situations, somebody who kills by accident, and these cities are protecting them from their relatives who would want to avenge their deaths, society who would condemn them, etc. And that's very interesting. But clearly, what this verse is recognizing is that even though he's not a murderer, he is going to be suffering, and he did this by accident. So how could it be? How could it be that it was by accident? And of course, you can say, well, a person needs to be very careful. And you've taken a life, you've taken a life. But what this scripture goes even further and says, no, if this happened, you deserve this sort of punishment, perhaps for something else you did. God made this come around because it was something that needed to happen. The verses following this, verses 15 and 16, talk about things having to do with a person's parents. Verse 15 and verse 17, having to do with what happens with your parents. So one, if you strike your father or mother, not necessarily kill him, but striking your parents will also be a capital crime, as is in verse 17, cursing your parents. So here there's a whole different thing going on. This is not just because you took someone's life, your life needs to be taken, but we have an enormous value placed here on the relationship that a person has to have with his father. Now, we know in the Ten Commandments, we've already learned, honor your father and mother. This takes it to a far greater level. And again, I don't want to get into the issue of capital punishment, yes or no. That's not the issue here. The issue is the principle that striking your parent or cursing your parent, acting in such terrible levels, the exact opposite of honoring your parents, is considered so grave that it's almost as if you have murdered somebody. And here I think we have to take into account what is the relationship between a person and their parents. Their parents are the ones who brought them into this life. They owe their life to their parents, so that when you are injuring your parents in some way, you are in a sense denying your own life. Because these are the people who brought you into this world. These are the people who raised you. And therefore, these are the people that you have to be particularly careful, not just in honoring, but in protecting. And you should never curse them, and you should never strike them. And I think that is a very interesting lesson we can learn from here. And finally, I'd like to just take a quick look at verses 28 and 29 and 33 and 34. In 28 and 29, we learn the difference. First of all, here we're talking about a person and his property. And here we're talking about an ox, okay? If an ox gores somebody. Now, people think, ox, what does that have to do with me today? Think car, okay? Your car, your motorcycle, or whatever, okay? Hurt somebody. What does the scripture say? You're responsible. Okay, now here we're talking about, really, it's not exactly a car, because in the case of a car, it's always, there's a driver behind the car. Here we're talking about an ox, and an ox can be either a violent ox or a calm ox. And what scripture basically is saying is, if it's an ox who has never hurt anyone before, you have a certain level of responsibility. But if your ox has already been violent, your level of responsibility is that much greater. Why? Because you knew he was violent, and therefore your responsibility to protect the public is that much greater. You can't say, oh, I didn't know, it's not me. No, this is your property, and you're responsible to protect the public. And you see that same idea in verses 33 and 34. If you dig a hole, okay, you're about to plant trees, and you're digging holes to put the trees in the ground, or you're about to, build a new house, and you've already dug down the holes for the foundation. It is your responsibility to ensure that the public is not harmed in any way. And if that means putting up a sign or putting a fence around or whatever, because if somebody is going to be hurt, you could say, oh, they should have been more careful. No, scripture said, no. The onus is on you. The owner of the property, the person who puts in the pit, the person who owns the ox, these are the people responsible. And I think this takes a level of responsibility in society way beyond what is commonly thought of, I would say. It's not just, did you intend to do something? Did you do something that actually brought about this issue? It's far more than that. If it's your property, then you are responsible to go out of your way to protect the public. And I think this is a marvelous, marvelous lesson that we can all learn. Anyway, have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video. And we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell. And that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.